Are you still there?
Well, I am in shock because I didn't realize there was a TOP and Tobago Forward coalition. I know that they've been, having a courtship and a romance, but it doesn't seem to have resulted in any marriage at all, from what I understand.
Well, they're still in talks. They're still in talks, and the volume is pretty low in the studio, so if we can get the volume raised just a little. They're still in talks, but, I mean, now that you're hearing, we'd like to get your thoughts on that coalition, that possible alliance.
Well, the thing is, from what I have seen thus far, and the public pronouncement and the posturing that has come from both leaders, it is clear that there is a grave disconnect in terms of what one side wants and what the other side is thinking.
Right.
And I saw an interview by Mr. Ashworth Jack, whereby he seemed to suggest that there were certain documents that he only received that morning of the interview, and therefore he expressed surprise at it, and I guess surprised that the contents were publicized, in a way as if to suggest that, something was being done that he was not fully aware of. And then on the other hand, we heard Ms. Moore from the Tobago Forward give her spin on what they thought was an agreement. I remember hearing her use those specific words, that they thought there was an agreement. So clearly both sides, left the courtship thinking different things.
Right.
So on the day when they were supposed to consummate the marriage, obviously nothing will happen because they're on two different wavelengths entirely. Of course, this does not augur well for Tobago or Tobagonians at all, because it is clear that if there's that type of disunity and division at the very get-go, then of course that portends for an ominous future, and it certainly gives you an indication that it's going to be a very rocky road, fraught with difficulty and danger, even if they were to try to eventually get hitched together in a gunshot wedding, so to speak.
Is there a history in the Caribbean, as far as you know, is there a history in the Caribbean of coalitions being successful?
Well, the thing is, if you look at it, the NAR was, born out of a coalition attempt where different parties came together, and they came together under one banner, right, which was the National Alliance for Reconstruction. And I have heard the talk from the two entities about, forming one banner and one symbol and one party name. But the thing is, it appears that they are talking out of both sides of their mouths, because it seems what they say to each other and what they say publicly are at odds, so therefore it cannot be that you are going to get any type of unity if they continue in that way. And
right.
The only people who end up suffering in this is the people of Tobago, because unfortunately you have basically little or no opposition, so therefore the ruling party is going to continue untrammeled and, without any sort of, checks and balances in place, and therefore that could never be good for any country, So therefore we really are in a dire state in Tobago. There is a crisis of paralysis. People just are there and nothing is being done, nothing is being achieved, even by the leadership of the THA, but they don't have to, because they're not being called upon to account, because there's no credible opposition, and the opposition forces cannot get their acts together. Everybody wants to be chief, everybody wants to be leader, so therefore the people of Tobago are the only ones who are suffering as a result. And my heart goes out to Tobago and to Tobagonians to be caught in this dilemma, where you have maybe the egos and personalities of the persons who want to be leaders, taking forefront and center stage above and beyond the needs of the people.
Okay.
Mr. Jack said that he's not opposed to the amalgamation of parties, persons coming towards the TOP.
Can you just speak up a little bit? It's very faint. I can hardly hear you.
Mr. Jack said that he is not opposed to the amalgamation of parties, everybody coming together. But this should be done in a timely and quick fashion, quick manner. Is Mr. Jack's attitude showing anything towards resolving these matters quickly to you?
Well, the thing is, Eddie, what we have here is both sides are eager, of course, for a coalition of sorts and some coming together because they recognize the old adage, united we stand, divided we fall. They recognize against the might of the PNM, their only chance is if they try to come together. However, I think the fundamental problem which they have not resolved and which will not be resolved in the near future, given the posturing we are seeing, is the question of leadership, because everybody wants to be chief. And that's the problem. That's the fundamental issue that they have. And I don't think that is going to be resolved so easily. Even within the Tobago Forward, there are questions that are being raised by persons on the ground, persons I've spoken to, persons who have met me, and persons who have called me. They said, look, even within that organization, there are leadership swirling around. There's Dr. Baker, he's deputy, but of course, sometimes deputies do have aspirations, one never knows, so the thing is, there are things that are tremendously unsettled in the Tobago political space, and unless and until these persons can get their acts together and realize that, look, they must make some measure of self-sacrifice for the greater good, then they're going to get nowhere. Unless and until they realize that. Because once they keep putting themselves first and their egos first, and each one wants to be chief and each one wants to be leader, then of course the PNM will be laughing all the way to the bank, and it's going to be another 12-0 again in the THA election.
Okay. All right, very quickly here, because we are out of time, Mr. George.
That's unfortunate.
Tobago healthcare system. Let's talk a little bit about the current situation. You are the representative or the lawyer, the attorney, representing some clients who have an issue here with regards to TRHA and a loved one. Tell us where things stand in relation to Tobago's healthcare.
Well, we got a response from the Secretary of Health indicating that the matter is being investigated and that they will revert to us shortly. Of course, shortly within the context of the TRHA, we have come to learn, means several months. And I don't think the family and relatives are prepared to wait that length of time, because the scenario is one, at least the fact scenario as presented. And of course, we would love to give the TRHA the opportunity to present their side of the story. But the fact scenario as we have it from our clients is that there has been a serious lack of communication, and there are some serious unexplained lapses and gaps in the treatment of this patient. Because how is it that a strong, healthy woman can walk into the hospital and end up basically as a vegetable for a simple situation where she went in simply to cut a boil that was on the side of her chest? One needs to get some explanation. How did she suffer brain damage as a result? Where did all these things come from? Heart attacks, 3 heart attacks she suffered. I think we really need to get some answers. And I have said before, the fundamental problem with the Tobago Regional Health Authority is that it is delinked from the control of the Minister of Health. There's no direct control that the Ministry of Health can exercise over the TRHA. It's the only regional health authority in Trinidad and Tobago that has this free pass, so to speak. They've gotten a buy. So they are only accountable primarily to the TRHA, and the minister has only limited or peripheral control. And that has been the source of the problem and will continue to be the source of the problem, because the THA is the one who primarily is responsible for the appointment or the selection of the candidates for the board of the TRHA. So it ends up being himself to himself, and no one is held accountable at the end of the day.
All right, and I know that this case continues, but what do you think should be put in place to hold persons accountable for malpractice? And we're not saying that that is the case in this situation, but in general, it seems as though no one is held accountable for malpractice in Trinidad and Tobago. But how do you think it should be treated with?
Well, the thing is, it's not that no one is held accountable. Thankfully, through resorts to litigation and the courts, we have had several cases where persons have been called upon to account. Persons have actually been disbarred from the medical profession because of illegal or unlawful practices. So the thing is, they can be held to account. It's unfortunately a lengthy and sometimes very costly procedure that is sometimes prohibitive for the average individual. So therefore, it's important to have discussions such as these to let people know that there are options. And I think as attorneys, we have a duty to try and assist the public as much as we could, even in circumstances where persons may not be able to pay the fees. You know, I think we really have to try and help the public, because otherwise, if it is that they have to go and pay market rates, so to speak, for legal services, then most of these cases will never see the light of day in court. You know, so I think that's where our recourse is, apart from getting the legislative change and the culture change. There needs to be a culture change in the TRA chain. They need to start being self-regulatory. In other words, they must recognize that, look, they have that duty and responsibility. Unfortunately, that has not yet happened. I know there's a new board in place. I am hopeful that they will see the light and they will begin that culture change. But as yet, we just have to basically hold our breath and hope that, you know, some change happens. Otherwise, it's basically after the fact, then you now seek resort to litigation to try and clean up the mess that has taken place. And that's what has been happening over the years.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. George. We'll have to leave it there for this time, but thank you so much for joining us and accommodating us.
Always a pleasure speaking to you, and have a good morning.
Thank you so much.